Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So I wanted to make a video on the current state of the middleweight division. The middleweight division, of course, being one of the premier divisions in boxing. Hosted great names like Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins, Gennady Golovkin, Carlos Monzon, Sugar Ray Robinson, Jake LaMotta, the list goes on and on. It's been one of the premier divisions in boxing. However, this weekend I was watching the undercard of Canelo versus Berlanga. I say watching it, I was struggling to stay awake because the undercard was pretty awful. But the co-main event was Danny Garcia versus Erislandy Lara. Erislandy Lara, the WBA middleweight champion, 41 years old, versus Danny Garcia, 36 years old, career 140 and 147 pounder. How this fight got made is beyond me. I'd like to have known how the WBA sanctioned this fight. Was Danny Garcia a ranked middleweight within the WBA before this fight? If he was, I'd like to know how. I'd like to know how the WBA sanctioned this fight, to tell you the truth. The fight itself, well, honestly, one of the worst fights I've seen this year. I started watching it early rounds. Lara predictably behind the jab, utilising his height and reach, picking off Danny Garcia from range. Danny Garcia not doing much of anything, looking like a corpse in there. And eventually Lara stopped Danny Garcia by a 9th round retirement. He dropped Danny Garcia towards the end of a round with an innocuous looking jab, I think it was. Danny Garcia went down kind of voluntarily, went to his corner, and Danny Garcia's dad, Angel Garcia, waved it off. It was such an uneventful, anticlimactic fight, and one of the worst world title fights I've seen in quite some time. But it really just summarises where the middleweight division is right now, in terms of depth, in terms of quality, in terms of compelling characters, interesting fighters. For me, the division has nothing, or close to nothing. I always felt the most talented guy in the division in the last couple of years has been Janibek Alimkhanuly. Janibek, of course, is the IBF and WBO middleweight champion, unified champion. And, to me, he's always been a guy who has shown promise. Talent, good southpaw, good puncher, etc. So I was kind of pinning my hat on Janibek bringing some sort of order to the middleweight division. Even if it wasn't necessarily the strongest division, I think a dominant champion can make that look a little better. When Gennady Golovkin was coming through, yeah, the level of competition wasn't always there. The level of opponents wasn't always there. But what he was doing, especially his early years in America, he would be fighting 3 or 4 times a year, just taking guys out, building the highlight reel, building the hype, building the fan base. That's what I really wanted to see from Janibek. However, that appears to not be the case with Janibek. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. He just hasn't been active enough. He's not fought this year. He last fought in October of 2023 against Vincenzo Gulateri. That was when he unified the IBF and WBO middleweight titles. By the way, Vincenzo Gulateri, one of the worst champions I've ever seen. But he won that fight, he became unified, and at that point in time, I was hoping that he would go through a tear, start being active, maybe fighting 3 times a year. And, if he could pick another belt up along the way, that's great. Again, bring some order to the middleweight division. But again, that's not panned out. He's not been active enough. And in his last proposed fight that was supposed to go down this summer against some unknown Australian guy, he blew the weight and he ended up in hospital with, I believe, kidney issues. So does this guy even have a future in the middleweight division anymore? To me, he's clearly the most talented guy there. I rate him. I rate his skill set, but can we count on this guy to again restore order in the middleweight division? Because ultimately, the only way this guy's going to become a star, the only way this guy's going to become a name, is if he follows a similar blueprint to Golovkin. He needs to be fighting super regular. He needs to be exposed to audiences on a regular basis. And providing he puts in the performances, gets stoppages, then his fan base will naturally grow. But that's not happened so far with Janibek. It doesn't really seem like Top Rank know what to do with him right now. And yeah, whether he fights this year, who knows? Doubt it. We're approaching October, so it looks like Janibek's going to have a year out. Then there was the WBC situation with Jamal Charlo holding the belt up for, 2 years? Over 2 years without defending? Finally, the WBC then make Carlos Adames the full champion. He was the interim champion for a long time. So Carlos Adames is now the WBC champ. Okay fighter. He's not bad, but ultimately he just seems like a belt holder to me, Where's that Janibek fight? They was talking about it, then both guys have talked about it, but it's not happened. Erislandy Lara, 41 years old, WBA middleweight champion, defending against Danny Garcia. This is the state of play right now at 160. You look at the top 10 at middleweight. Who's there? Shane Mosley Jr. is top 10 according to some lists. I mean, even outside the champions, the contenders are super weak. Patrice Volney is listed as top 10 in some places. Patrice Volney, of course, lost to Esquiva Falcao. There's nothing here at middleweight. Zero. The only prospect of any note is Hamza Shiraz from the UK. Now, I think Hamza Shiraz is decent. He's capable, tall, rangy guy for middleweight, has decent power, and I think he's got scope to get better, and he's got scope to maybe have a fan base, but he's really the only one. And it's not like Hamza Shiraz is some blue chip, Olympic gold medalist prospect. That's a sure thing. He's good, he's talented, but he's not a sure thing. And below Hamza Shiraz, to me, there's nothing there. I mean, when I look at the middleweight division, I'm 30. For me, this is the weakest it's been since I've been watching boxing. And to be honest, come to think of it, I don't think I've ever really seen a super strong middleweight division. The Golovkin era was criticised for being weak, but, guys like Martin Murray, guys like Matthew Macklin, guys like David Lemieux, they would do very well in this era, probably pick up titles. Martin Murray would pick up a title in this era. A Prima Lemieux would do very well in this era. Even a guy like Daniel Geale, for example, would do well in this era, in my opinion. And, even before Golovkin, the Sergio Martinez era wasn't the strongest, but again, stronger than it is now. And Hopkins era, people never levy this criticism at Bernard Hopkins, but you look at a lot of his middleweight title defenses, he never went through a who's who. It wasn't like the middleweight division was super strong. Guys like Antoine Eccles, Robert Allen, William Joppy, these guys weren't great fighters. They were okay, but they weren't nothing special. But again, in this era, these sort of guys would clean up. They would certainly become title holders. And again, I think all of these eras I'm comparing the current era to are actually relatively weak. The Golovkin era, the Sergio Martinez era, and the Hopkins era. They were all pretty weak. They weren't great. But comparing those eras to today, I would kill to have those eras back, to be honest with you. I would kill to have that level of competition back. It doesn't exist now. Nothing there. Probably is the worst division in boxing, I would say. I'd say it's the worst division in boxing. And it's sad to see. I don't remember the last time I was excited for a middleweight title fight. I guess Canelo Golovkin 2, maybe. I guess that was it, And even then, because of political circumstances, I was dubious about it. So maybe Canelo Golovkin 1 was the last middleweight title fight I was truly excited for. It's been a long while now. It's been a long while. And yeah, I don't see it getting any better anytime soon. When you look at the middleweight division as of right now, when you look at when you actually look at the prospects coming through and things like that, I don't really see where the hope is. What I will say though, there are some super welterweights who could move up to make it more interesting. You know, guys like maybe Israel Madrimov, Tim Zhu, Sebastian Fundora, guys like that. If these guys move up, yeah, things could get a bit more interesting. Even maybe a Terence Crawford, who knows? Jamel Charlo still knocking about, who knows? But I guess the question I have to ask, I'm not an old head, I'm 30, I'm not that old. But the question I would ask to all of those watching this video, however old you are, but are ideally older, has there ever been a weaker middleweight division? Because watching that Danny Garcia, Lara fight, I swear to God, gave me depression. Because that's what the fucking commentary team were talking about half the time, was Danny Garcia's fight with depression. I got fucking depressed watching it. That was the story of the fight. Honestly, it was so bad, that fight. And yeah, listen, I've understood the middleweight division's been weak for a long time, but that fight really put it into perspective. Danny Garcia versus Lara in 2024. God help us. What's your thoughts? Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy. Peace.